Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Investor Motivation Podcast. I am Amy, and we are joined by Rob remotely today. Rob, how are you?
Very remote. I'm remote up in Brisbane, so not very remote as in Outback, but in Brizzy for a conference, which has been great, and staying at a really cool spot right next door to the main square. I think it's King George Square, where there's the clock tower and the sort of the city office. So beautiful building. It's beautiful city, Brisbane.
Yeah, you look relaxed and happy to be there.
Yeah, absolutely, and always happy to get home as well. Get back to the office.
Yeah.
And what has been happening in the office?
Well, whenever you're not in the office, it's a little bit quieter, which is great for us to, I'll do a bit of catch up on some things and, do a lot more marketing, delve into things. So it's been pretty not good.
Very good. And you had a conference during the week. Was there any, that was more, I was at the Self-Managed Super Fund conference.
Yeah.
All things estate planning, self-managed super fund. You did portfolio construction conference, which is solely investment orientated. Was there any real bits of gold in there that you'd like to share with me and also our listeners?
Yeah, so Portfolio Construction Forum is, as the name suggests, mainly about investing and how to construct portfolios for the future decades to come. It was interesting talking about the Magnificent Seven in the United States, the top 7 stocks of the NASDAQ, and although they have had such a huge run up, that there is potentially some potential for the next few years to continue that run. I think a lot of investors are very wary that there has been a huge run up lately, but listening to their thesis around why that could continue, and it's always good to hear the two sides of the coin and get rid of all the biases.
Right, it was really interesting. I had a conversation with a chap from a broking firm yesterday, and we looked at NVIDIA and we go, well, geez, where can NVIDIA go from here? And so he said, oh, Rob, it'd be hard to buy now. And I said, well, it is hard to buy if it's just ran, 300 to 400% in a really short time frame. And so, yes, it would be hard to buy. And then overnight they report their quarterly earnings and they're up by 16% over the day. So it's, I suppose that's where, holding for the long term and not trying to guess what's going to happen, in the very short term is often probably the advice that we've always done. We do like to try to buy when people are a little bit nervous. There's a little bit of blood on the street, people are a bit fearful after a run down. And no doubt, the run that we have had up over the last 12 months and particularly the last 3 months has been really, really strong. There'll be some sort of correction at some stage, and that'll provide patient people some opportunity. But we've seen quite a few things. NVIDIA was one that's a graphics chip maker, and only last week or the week before was Altium with a takeover offer from Japanese business, Amy. So we didn't see that 30% jump happen. So we've got we can nearly do a whole session on, the capital gains, how we're going to try to manage that for our clients.
Yeah.
Because we've got a lot of clients that own Altium. We don't have a choice whether we keep it or it's going to be bought. It's going to be sold. There's going to be a capital gains. But just holding it for a very long time for our clients for some clients, yielded in percentage, excluding dividends, up to probably 1,600% return.
Yeah.
That is awesome. 16-fold your money.
Almost a 20-bagger.
Nearly a 20-bagger. So really exciting for a lot of our clients. But a bit of work to do because of it, because we've got to try to manage the capital gains the best we can in this financial year. And that might mean, the catch-up concessional contributions for superannuation for those that haven't used all their concessional caps. So, lots of work ahead of us, Amy. There's and even out of the conference that I've been to, there's a lot of work to be done when it comes to the $3 million level. That comes in 25, 26. And we've got less than 18 months to really start to prepare and get our head around that as well.
Yeah, got lots to do, don't we?
Yeah. Now, acknowledgement of land, and then we will kick off on today's discussion.
Perfect. On behalf of the Investor Motivation Podcast, we would like to pay our respects to the traditional owners on the land on which we do record this podcast and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.
Cool. Thank you for doing that, Amy. Now, Aussie, one thing that we're going to have a chat about and is, I suppose, a bit of the average household, the average Aussie, and what we would potentially suggest that they may consider as part of any advice that they would get, noting that this is general advice only. So do you want to run through our fictitious scenario, but a common scenario?
Yeah, so we've just done a scenario based on kind of off the street average Aussies. We've tried to make it. So clients, that have never seen a financial advisor before, they haven't really delved deeply into their finances, which is a really common, case study for financial advisors in Australia. So for this one, we're going to assume that we've got two clients, John and Jane. They're in their early 40s, have a average annual household income of $150,000, annual expenses of $70,000. The couple doesn't have any financial assets in their own names, but they've got $50,000 in cash, home loan of $450,000, and then combined $250,000 in super. Not sure really how it's invested, probably the default option. Not sure if there's insurance in there, probably is with the default option again.
Yep.
And they've got two young kids and have not done any estate planning.
Right. So don't know where their insurances are. And I suppose let's start off with the negative stuff. But if it all went wrong, in the short term, not knowing what their TPD cover is, their income protection, their trauma cover, what happens to their assets if someone was to pass away or be totally and permanently disabled. There's a lot of issues there, really front end. It's quite glaring.
Yeah, especially that, $450,000 home loan. If both of the parents were to pass away, that's a massive debt to leave behind to the estate to have to pay down. And then at the same time, there is no estate. So that's family arguments for both, partners on who does what and who's paying for this. And it's just a mess of a thing.
Well, where would we start there, Amy? I suppose life insurance is probably, in my view, a bit of a negative, but it's a negative, but also when it's done correctly provides peace of mind. And once this stuff is done and tidied up, then you don't need to think about it. Then you can concentrate on fun stuff.
Yeah, and the thing with default insurance within super, if these clients have default insurance, that it used to be quite a large amount that you could have without even deciding on how much to have. But these days it has really dwindled down on the default cover because there are so many more, mental health illnesses and occupational hazards about. People thinking they've got this default cover that's going to do the job. It's not, likely that it actually will do the job.
Yeah, and in this scenario, as default cover generally is higher amounts for younger people, and as we get older, they assume as we get older that the balance sheet becomes stronger, which is true, but it's not always the case. But as we get older, the amount of cover that we got, the default cover, generally is slowly reducing because I suppose the super funds don't want increasingly higher premiums to start detracting from your retirement benefits. But how would we, I suppose, if we think, if someone was to pass away or be totally and permanently disabled, one, we would always look to superannuation, given that it's a couple. Out of superannuation, retirement benefits, superannuation benefits, and insurance will go to each other tax-free. So that's a really nice spot to have. But what would we look to achieve in terms of levels of cover, Amy?
With levels of cover, we're generally looking at, first of all, debt. So making sure that debt is paid off if somebody was to pass away. And then also, if that person was to pass away, their income and their future ability to bring income into the family disappears with them. So getting a really good lump sum to fund future goals that they might have, which could be the children's educational costs, or just replacing that income with a big lump sum that's invested and earning, a 5% return to go towards the household income is, definitely things we look at. But it's really just what are the client's goals and what levels of cover do they want to be able to replace.
Yes, and how much pressure does the remaining person or, the person looking after someone that's totally and permanently disabled, you want flexibility, and that the flexibility for me comes from making sure that all debt is paid off. that testament, you might include that there's $100,000 per child of cover to make sure that education is taken care of. And then there is that lump sum that you mentioned at a certain rate of return that would bring in a passive 40 or 50 grand per year.
Yeah.
And that's there to give the surviving spouse the flexibility and the choice to, right, I'm not going to work as hard as I have, I don't need to, more time with the kids at a really tough time.
Yeah. And of course, those levels of cover and things to cover and fund in the future are very, quite luxurious. It's almost a gift to be giving the loved one left, all of this flexibility. So some people might not want that kind of level of cover. So it's really understanding with the clients, what do they value? Do they want to send their children to private schools? Are they happy with government schools? And it's getting into the really nitty gritty and making sure you're covered for it.
And when it comes to the types of insurance you get, obviously death and TPD are the two main ones that I've mentioned there. They can sit within superannuation. As I said, it's a nice ideal spot for it because it's your super fund. You're still paying for it, but it's the super fund, not your cash flow, which means that there's still plenty of money, well, hopefully, to pay off the home loan, which will be obviously one of these clients, this age group's, one of their goals is to have less debt. Mm-hmm. But there's two other types of insurance. Amy, do you want to cover off on those two for me, please?
Yep. So income protection, which we can also have inside super, that will cover up to 75% of your income that you've got currently. So again, if you were unable to work for whatever reason, replacing 75% of that income, so you're not stretching out the person left working, just that flexibility factor again. And then we've got trauma insurance, which is critical illness cover, cancer, stroke, heart attack, the main illnesses that you would be given a lump sum. And so that cover can't be held inside superannuation. So that is the only cover that you are, if you want to have it, it has to come out of your cash flow. But that's generally a lump sum to cover off on medical, rehab, home modification costs that you might need.
Yeah. And obviously, outside of super, not tax deductible premiums. But if you do get a lump sum payout, that's not taxable either. As opposed to income protection, that can be deductible either in the super fund or in your own name. So if you have a higher, and if cash flow is not a huge problem, I'd always prefer and recommend that income protection sits in owned by my client's name outside of super, because generally they're going to have a higher tax rate, so that will be more valuable in their name than the super fund.
Yep.
Very good. And when it comes to trauma cover, we're not covering our clients for the same amount of life cover or death cover and TPD. It might be 100, 200, 300 grand or 400 grand thereabouts. It gets expensive because we're more likely to claim on that one. But for this scenario, we would at least be starting for death cover of $450,000 plus probably another $1 million to provide education costs and that lump sum to provide that flexibility and passive income. For trauma, it might just be $100,000 to $300,000, but we've got the calculators on that to help determine that and make sure that people are well covered across the board.
Yeah, definitely. Well, while we're still in superannuation, we might go into the investment side of things. Like I said, these clients weren't sure if they were invested into more growth assets or defensive assets, probably the default option, which for a lot of clients, especially in their early 40s, is probably a balanced option, which is that 50% into the growth assets, businesses, property, and then 50% into the defensive conservative assets, which are more the cash and term deposits, fixed interest assets. And a lot of people do have that goal of building up their superannuation for retirement and working, hard for that 25 years, and then they hit retirement, and then that's the honeypot at the end, and that's all people really think about. But we are in Australia, we do have awesome medical resources behind us, and that are going to make us live for quite a long time. So it's making sure that people are aware that you're not only invested for the next 25 years till you hit retirement, but you're invested until your life expectancy, which can be mid-90s these days, getting into the hundreds. So it's a huge runway to be able to be invested in those growth assets. And we all know the growth assets are the volatile ones. They go up and down. But if in doubt, you zoom out and it's generally, a pretty upwards figure from start to end.
Yeah. So, Amy, how's the best way for people to go and see what the difference that 1 or 2% make over a long period of time? Where's the best spot to go to play with calculators?
I would definitely go to the Money Smart website and look at their compound interest calculator, and you can put what your super balance is now, what your contributions might be over the lifetime, or not even worry about the contributions, just the percentage compounding. Yep. And it's huge, the difference that it makes.
Right. Yeah. All right. So, and I think I really recommend people do that, because I think people underestimate that. And what tends to happen, again, like with the life insurance decreasing within superannuation, as you get a bit closer to retirement, particularly the industry funds do what they call life cycle investing. So as you get closer to retirement, they're going to decrease the amount of growth assets. By the time you get to 65 or 67, you might have 25% of your money in growth assets, and the rest is very conservative. So you don't get any exposure to NVIDIA, Microsoft, the Magnificent Seven. Businesses that over the long term will vastly outperform conservative assets. And if you're 65 and you're sitting in conservative world, and you and or your spouse will get to mid-90s, well, I think Peter Thornhill had the classic one there: if you're going to be too conservative, you better die quick, because you'll run out of money.
Yeah, it's harsh, but it really does summarise it all perfectly. Yeah, people think that.
People's got a way with words, Amy.
Yeah.
Just so you know exactly what he's thinking.
Yeah, definitely, and it's common sense, and everyone can understand it, so it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'd be looking at the asset allocation and assessing, what is the balance between growth assets and conservative assets. Would you recommend people do a risk profile as a starting point?
Well, I think the starting point for us is always going to be education and showing them that, growth assets are volatile, but that there is a trending pattern which is upwards. And we've seen that. We've got years and years of research and data to back that up, and also educate them on what the actual risks of being too conservative are. People say the growth assets are the risky assets and the conservative is just, safe. But it's really not that safe if you are in those lifestyle grouped default options and you're at 65 and you're in 80% cash. If your cash is earning 3% in interest in the bank, but inflation's running at 5%, you're actually going backwards. But people, you don't think about that on the daily. So it's really educating the people to begin with, and they can make the informed decisions from there. Of course, down the track, we legally have to do what is called a risk profile. So we go through a set of about 8 questions in the office that tells us how investors might be most comfortable investing, because not a lot of people are going to be comfortable in 100% growth assets, because it's a bit of a mental game, isn't it? You see the price going up and down, and it's being able to handle that. So you don't want to put someone in 100% growth if they're going to freak out every single time there's a dip and then want to kiss your feet every time there's a high. There is a level of comfort that people need. We would do that risk profile down the track after all the education, so they can make that informed decision.
Yeah, that was going to be my point, Amy, that generally we like to do these risk profiles only after there's been some great discussions, learning and knowledge building. Otherwise, and the risk profiles, whilst I'm not a great believer in them, they can be part of that education. But to understand that short-term volatility shouldn't be seen as a risk. It's just normal parts of the movement of markets. But what is a real risk is to be too conservatively invested over a long period of time, where inflation just erodes the value of your money. That's a risk that you only work out that was there after 20 years and the value of your money is gone. And I suppose that's where we spend a lot of our time, is educating. It's what we believe in as well. It's how we've invested ourselves and how I've done for myself and my own family. I put up with a lot of volatility, but I own a lot of really high quality businesses that have done exceedingly well over a long period of time, with a lot
Yeah.
of volatility in the short term that I ignore.
Yep. Or you see that volatility and it's not, fear factor when the price drops, but actually opportunity. And do I have cash reserves to be able to jump in? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. So review superannuation. Make sure in your early 40s, given that more than likely, there's at least 50 years to go for a couple in their early 40s. That's very much a long term. You can
Yep.
put up with volatility, and say they're at 42, you cannot legally touch the money for at least 18 years.
Yes.
So preservation age will be 60. So that's when you're a chance. You need to be fully retired between 60 and 65 to be able to access the money.
Yeah, and then 65, it's open slather.
Yeah, working or not, you can access your superannuation. So I think it's not just superannuation versus mortgage. If people are paying extra off, which is one of those objectives that people want to get rid of their debt, sometimes the calculator will say otherwise. And again, seek financial advice on this point, but they can make a huge difference to your superannuation balance for two reasons. You get the arbitrage on your tax rate is up here, super tax rate is here, and that can be probably at least a 17% difference in the new tax world, the phase 3 tax cuts we're seeing. And then you get the actual compound interest and the growth of the investments within superannuation. So there's a real double whammy there that makes superannuation over, salary sacrifice into super over extra contributions to your mortgage more attractive. Yeah. At your age, Amy, at mid-20s, it's hard to look that far into the future and get excited about that. But someone that's in their 40s, Ash in our office built an awesome calculator that helped calculate the benefit of that strategy. It's an absolute ripper. But it's a hard sell because people want to pay down their loan.
And I guess that doesn't even take into consideration the fact that you have put a lot of money into super that's been compounding in that awesome tax environment. And that tax environment only gets better when you hit pension phase. If you were to have that money in your own account, it would still be also in your personal name. It would still be being taxed at the individual income tax brackets that we all know. But in super, in pension phase, it's the only environment where you can get a 0% tax rate on earnings and income. It's, no reason not to get it as bolstered up as much as you can.
Yeah, the superannuation system is exceedingly generous. At the moment, we can have, retirees can have up to $1.9 million each. That is for a couple, $3.8 million. It's completely tax-free within the fund when in pension mode and over 60 and retired, and tax-free out.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. So it's very generous, and you can use it as part of, for this couple, as using super might be an alternative to paying extra off the home loan. But I said the calculator will prove that, and it does. It makes common sense that it does, given that you're saving on for this scenario, assuming that they're paying say 32 cents on the dollar tax in the new world. That's after July 1st July this year. That's 17% tax saving day one, no risk.
It's awesome.
And obviously, you mentioned co-contributions and spouse contributions. There's some of that low-hanging fruit that we often refer to.
Yeah, and this is really, you've got to look at the eligibility criteria of the individuals and what the income breakdown really is. But government co-contribution, easy win if you're earning under $45,000. Put $1,000 into super, the government will put $500 in. That's a 50%, guaranteed return on that $1,000. That, as financial advisors, we never can say the word guarantee. Too much red tape, and it's hard to guarantee anything. But when it is a government incentive like this, it's the easy, low-hanging fruit for everybody.
Yeah, and do them early enough, huge wins for them. And there's a strategy there. This is going away from the core discussion, but for grandparents or parents that can't find anything to buy their grandchildren and they're at uni and working part-time, and depending on how generous they are, make a personal contribution to super, particularly if they're earning under that 44 grand-ish area. Put some money in, and the government will match it 50%. you don't have to put $1,000 in, but that'd be nice, grandparents.
Yeah, and with the contribution splitting option, it's especially a great strategy if these clients were a few years apart and we want to do this, superannuation over home loan contribution, putting it into, the younger person's super to begin with if they're the higher interest income earner, but then splitting it and sending that money to the spouse's account, superannuation account that might be older, so that they reach preservation age or retirement earlier and can withdraw that money to pay off the home loans sooner.
Clever strategy, Amy. Love that.
There's a lot of really clever strategies out there, so definitely worth seeking financial advice, people.
Yeah. Obviously, the debt, 450 grand debt, that at their ages, that's probably completely normal now, but a generation ago that people were really tidying up their home loans at around 40 to 50. And I know things have changed because property prices have gone nuts, gone through the roof. We're a nation of property investors and buyers, and it's a one-way road up, and you've just got to pay up. But yeah, the debt, the interest rate they pay, the cash they've got, should that be in an offset? Should they be checking their interest rate? What's your thoughts on some of those points, Amy?
I think banks are a little bit more lenient the more debt you have, because obviously you're a better customer for them. They're charging more interest on more money under your name. So, but you do actually have a little bit more power the more debt you've got on how flexible banks might be with your interest rate, because they don't want you to move to another bank. So it's definitely always worth just testing out the waters with the banks and seeing if the interest rate can go down. Flexibility of offset accounts are great if you've got short-term goals that you need liquid money for that can't be in super because you can't access it for 25 years. Definitely great if it's an easy transactional account.
Okay, so I think going online, checking the comparative sites on home loan rates, making sure that yours is as sharp as can be.
Definitely.
And again, like we suggested with your superannuation, go and have a look and do the calculation on what 0.5% difference makes in terms of how much interest you pay. It's huge.
Yeah, it's same for the interest in the bank as it is for you in your super.
Compounding, working against you. Now, obviously, when you go to the banks, they will try to lend you as much as possible, and they'll want you to have this debt for as long as possible. Hence, we now have apparently not 25-year loans, not 30, but now 35 is what you can be the time frame. So this takes you, a lot of people, far beyond retirement.
Yeah, that was a visible cringe on my behalf when you said that. Yeah, I think it's okay if you're really young and you've got that huge time to be able to pay that debt off, hopefully before that end 30-year goal. So you've got more time to save for super. But if you are your early 40s and it's a new home loan that's then still got 35 years, and obviously the banks do the calculations at the start to say this is the maximum amount they can borrow and the minimum repayments will be the 35 years. So it does restrict future cash flow a lot. So it's always a conversation to, do you really need the house with the extra bedroom, or do you really need to upgrade at all? Yeah, it's very personal, but
I think one thing worth mentioning, obviously, baby boomer parents, and one of the things we saw at the conference today was where there is a lot of money that's going to change hands, and I think it was over 200 billion per year, all the way. It's trillions of dollars over the coming decades that will go from baby boomers down to my generation and this average family, so that there'll more than likely be some inheritance coming through. Is it fair enough to say one thing that you and I have spoken about on our podcast in the past, Amy, is making sure we've got the balance between now, having fun, and not going without knowing that, let's say there is a substantial amount of wealth coming in the future that will tidy up some stuff that, should we take that into account, Amy? It feels a bit bad, but I feel as though it should be part of the calculations.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. It does feel a little bit immoral in one way to bank on a family member's passing, but if it is, guaranteed, I don't know how guaranteed it can really be at the end of the day unless you're sitting with the person doing their will and have control over their finances. But I think it's okay to factor in some of the costs, but I would definitely suggest factoring that in as a luxury.
Yeah.
Not
So plan for doing it by yourself to get there, because there'll be a lot of gratification in doing so, but also knowing that there conservatively be X. And this is something that I do when I do my projections, that we'll say, well, there'll be something coming in, but let's be conservative.
Yeah, let's pretend it's not.
Yeah, and let's see what that looks like. So I think it's worth being a realist in that area, because battling and not doing the fun stuff while the kids are young, and just forever thinking about this retirement, and being too tight now, knowing that, well, my parents are very wealthy and there's at least $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 coming through at some stage, which will be that top up, and we can have a little bit more fun now.
Yeah. And that's, again, that goals-based advice conversation we have had in the past, but knowing that to live your life happily indefinitely, you only need so much money. You don't need to be super tight at the start and then, die with a massive inheritance. It's up to you to spend your money and have the fun along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Amy, one thing we should finish off on is, whilst we started on the insurance and all that negative stuff, we can finish on that as well. We didn't cover off on the estate planning. What's the 4 key documents that we always tell our clients that they need?
Yeah, so wills, number 1, making sure that everything in your estate is going to be paid where you want it to be paid and when you want it to be paid. And then power of attorneys along the way, financial, medical are the main ones, and also your medical treatment decision maker, advanced care directive, similar terms, which is guidance for your medical power of attorney on how you would like to be treated if you couldn't speak for yourself.
Great. And for those, when you're doing your wills, it's more expensive, but if your estate is going to be substantially large at some point in the future, then having a will with testamentary trust provision within that, and obviously I think we've done a podcast with, I'm not sure if we covered off with Patrick, one of our local solicitors, but testamentary trust provision provides a lot of flexibility to hold those assets, which come with many protection issues, benefits, and also tax-saving benefits as well. So seek legal advice in that area, which is absolutely vital. Yeah.
There's a case, I won't go into details, but 2 partners separated a while ago, but wills and estate planning were never done. Kids along the way, so the wife now, or the lady has the kids, husband has passed away, no testamentary trusts in place, and there wasn't a great relationship between the husband and wife at the time of splitting, but all the money has gone to the female because the children are underage. So when your children are underage, it goes to the guardian of those children straight away for them to spend as they choose, which lady now goes out and buys new cars and just spends the money, not leaving it for the kids, which was in the wishes of the husband. But the fact that there wasn't that testamentary trust done to say all my money goes to those kids, and then when they turn 18, 21, they have full access to the funds. So that's, right, I guess, just an example of how important those testamentary trusts really are, and having the estate planning done right.
Absolutely. Fantastic. All right, great conversation. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Robert. Until next time, everybody.